Hey, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
I'm Mike Wolfson,
and welcome back to Two Voice Devs.
two voice devs.
Mike, fantastic to have you on again.
Wow.
This one, you had asked me a question a few weeks back, a little bit hypothetical, a little bit not. And then related to that, Google released something about this concept that we were discussing. Why don't you take it away and talk about what this latest release from Google is?
Sure. So the reason you were maybe talking in hypotheticals about our conversation months ago is because we are both in the early access program for Gemini. So we had access to this feature called personal intelligence um, earlier than other people. And the conversation we had is, are you going to sign up? And you said, heck no.
No.
Um, and I said, um, yes, I guess. Not regrettably, but I didn't have the same resistance as you did, and we'll talk about that as we go through this conversation.
So so this is to be clear up front, this is a feature for the Gemini chat, right?
Uh, well, they said that it actually will be extending, and I don't really understand all of the Gemini product scope. It definitely works in the iOS and Android apps.
Okay.
So Gemini app, and they said something about in Chrome as well.
Okay, that's interesting.
In their blog post, and we'll link a blog post to this that has more details about where they're releasing it.
But this is not a feature that is part of the Gemini model that developers have access to.
Oh, right. Yeah, this is not for let's describe what it is for people that don't know.
Okay.
Gemini, of course, has its own corpus of knowledge that it has gained from its own look into the world. Google is allowing you now to link a variety of your own data sources into your AI experience. So that includes photos, search, Google Workspace, Gmail, Calendar, maybe. I can't. There may be a few other ones, but kind of some of the big ones I just mentioned. So that is now part of your search experience, or part of your AI experience, and part of your personal intelligence. It can use that to help answer questions.
Now, I feel like for a while now, there's always been a connection to things like Google Docs. So you could say something like, look in my Google Docs for something, and it would answer that. How is personal intelligence different than that?
Well, I don't think this was always as directly integrated in Gemini as it was before, and I don't think all those other data sources were included before. Photos, of course, and search. I think those are two super interesting and very powerful additional sets of context you can add. And maybe we could talk about that for a second. Why
And you just hit, I
this
think, the key word there, context.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
So one of the things we kind of wanted to talk about in this section was how interesting a product this is and how Google is in a unique position to be able to provide this particular product. Maybe this is kind of the culmination of their whole existence up until now.
yeah.
There's no other company that can, well, of course, only for people that have given all of their information over the past 20 years to Google, like you and me likely have. Um, all that information is secure with them. Obviously, Claude and OpenAI are not going to have access to that. There is no, direct pipeline to our Google info. That pipeline only exists within Google, which makes this product extremely unique to Google and something only that they can service.
And I think that, this is certainly the kind of thing that I feel like I and many others have been expecting Google to do for a couple of years now, is be able to say, we now have this AI layer over your entire Google life. And you're right, there's almost no other company that even comes close to doing that. Apple comes close. A totally different
Yep.
approach, but Apple's about the only one that can do something similar.
Although Apple can't, unfortunately, and maybe they will be able to in the future. Apple is absolutely a company you would be able to trust with all that data, and um, they are a great example of a company that could do this.
Right.
Um, Interesting note, you said, Google, this is something we thought Google would do forever, and et cetera. The rollout of this was pretty restrictive. And the most of any of the different features I've seen them roll out through our years in the EAP program, there was a special sign up program. It was a lengthy review process, etc. So they didn't really roll this out lightly. This wasn't something they, pushed out. I think they put a lot of thought into how they're going to enable this because
Yeah.
it's a big deal. I believe it's amongst the most watershed features of AI I've seen, in my experience, along with image gen and video gen. This is a
I,
pretty important feature.
I certainly think this is the kind of feature that will be more of a day-to-day interaction point. Up till now, we've seen a lot of examples of using Gemini, like plan a vacation. Right. I plan a vacation every how often? Why don't you describe how
Yeah, I'd
you
like you.
can or how you do use it?
I'm gonna describe, since you don't use it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna describe a use case that really worked for me, and I want you to come up with something that you may think may be useful that you can answer once I'm done. So this is a real use case. I was in Minnesota recently for work, um, and I asked Gemini, use my personal information to figure out how many times I've been here. Um, and it absolutely answered correctly. 4 times. It told me I had been there once in February. You stayed at this hotel. You were here for a dev fest. You were here uh, these 2 dates. You stayed at these hotels. Um, that sort of context came immediately. And although I could have searched it myself somehow, for it to be able to kind of pull all that information together about my personal intelligence, my personal history, is incredibly powerful.
Right. I mean, to be honest, there are plenty of ways that I could see me using this. For those of you that know my fascination with spreadsheets, for example, I would very much want to be able to do something like, I'm currently tracking my weight in one spreadsheet, and I'm tracking my blood pressure in another spreadsheet. And when I'm at my doctor, I'd love to be able to just say, hey, how's my blood pressure been compared to my weight recently? A casual query like that, combining two different spreadsheets or two different data sources. I mean, if I was using um, a wrist health monitor, for example, have it pull in my sleep habits, my blood pressure, have it pull in all this data and have it handy for me, and then give me a summary that I could just give to my doctor.
It's interesting you brought up a health related example, because in that the blog post they released about personal intelligence, they specifically mentioned health. It was in the portions where they're talking about privacy, and actually we'll come back to a few things relating to privacy in a second. But they specifically called out health, and they said, well, we would avoid talking about health. If you insist, we will, basically. Um, which I thought was very interesting. They were like, well, they were kind of demure. Like, I could look up the exact sentence, which doesn't matter, but they were like, yeah, we'd rather not, but if you ask, we will.
I could also see plenty of other, cases where I would have data that I've contributed that I've saved for myself that I now want to ask additional questions about in other contexts.
Yep.
You know,
Important. Let's just talk about the privacy for a second
let's
and
go to
just
the
make
privacy.
sure. And
It's an important issue. Absolutely.
yeah, it's important to note that Gemini is not using any of this data to train their own model. This is more like what I envision a RAG maybe, that it's providing this additional context as part of its prompt to Gemini. But they definitely have stated multiple times that they're not training on any of this data. They are using, and of course, if you have to opt into this, the prompts themselves to help make Gemini better, they say. I would guess you can opt out of that specifically if you don't want to provide feedback. But we obviously do.
That's an interesting and important distinction there. So on one hand, they will be taking what you say so that they can train Gemini better on what was said, but they're not taking the data that they've retrieved. That part is still your data. That's a great, that's actually a really interesting distinction that's being made there. And I'm not
It's an
sure a lot
important
of people
distinction.
think about that when they're thinking about conversational privacy with my agent.
Yeah, no, and you got it. You understood the distinction there for sure.
So what other use cases, I guess, are you seeing, are you hearing others talking about?
The use case they describe in the blog post, which was okay, is they were going shopping for a car tires, and they didn't have all the information they needed, so they were able to use Gemini to retrieve actual information about their car, including
Okay.
trim model, um, and some specific details they needed, including a license plate. And this is they were able to capture that from photos, and then that license plate information was never fed back into Gemini. So,
Wow. Okay. That's, yeah. Thinking about the number of times, I mean, I've certainly taken plenty of pictures with me in my car. So that's an interesting point. But I'm also thinking I have an absolute massive number of pictures. And I kind of wonder just how well it handles the fact that I've got, I have pictures. Sure, I have pictures of documents. I have pictures of me in my car. I have pictures of, landscapes, of, you name it. I've got tons and tons of pictures. I take hundreds of pictures at I/O every year. Um, I have to wonder what it makes out of all of this and what Gemini is going to make when I ask certainly some questions. I mean, it'll be great. I can say things like, who did I talk to at I/O this year? And it will, bring up my I/O pictures and tell me. But I wonder what else it'll come up.
so that's an interesting thing that maybe we were going to talk about in the beginning, but if that is, should you allow Google access to this information? And maybe we bring this. Actually, this is something we want to talk about in
Yeah.
the end. I felt when we first talked about this, you said, "Heck no, I'm not doing it." Can you imagine giving Google, info to all that my world? No way. And I said, you know what? Why not? And I think one of my reasonings was um, Google already has all this information, and they are likely using it themselves to aggregate my advertising info. And they probably know a lot more about me. This actually kind of goes back to what you were talking about a second ago. They probably know a lot more about me in some respects than maybe I realize. And maybe I could start to leverage some of that as well for my own power. Based on what we were talking about before, maybe it'd be interesting to see what Google thinks about your photo collection, not what you think.
That's a
Um,
good point. That's a very good point. I guess it does kind of go into the question of why somebody wouldn't want to opt into. And actually, let's make a distinction first. This is not an on-off switch, right? You can say
that,
I want mail, but not my photos.
great distinction. Let's talk through that for a second. So you enable this on a system-wide basis. You go into your settings and you connect it to each of those different resources. I personally did not connect it to search because I imagine my search history must have some nuances that are not probably, I don't know, who knows about my search history, but maybe leave that one out. Um, so you get to pick your choices through all of those. You can also turn those on and off at any time. Also, you can opt out of a chat individually. You can start to use personal intelligence, use my personal intelligence to figure out XYZ, and then you can say, okay, stop. I don't want to use my personal intelligence anymore. Just let's go back to normal.
Okay.
So that was an interesting nuance that you can actually opt out in the middle of a conversation and a chat, which is not something easy to do in Gemini previously. Kind of switch
Yeah.
between tools and models, etc. Although I think that is getting better too. But that's
I feel like one of the things though that and part of what gave me a lot of hesitancy in why I didn't jump into this, um, aside from not really having the time to play with it the way I wanted to, was it doesn't feel nuanced enough to me. So, on one hand, I might want it to have access to my email, because then it will see, my bills when they come in. It will get a lot of information that I may want to ask it about, but it'll also have access to private conversations that I don't necessarily want it to have constant access to. I wanted to have access to some photos, but not necessarily all my photos. I wanted to have access to some documents, but not necessarily all my documents. And there's no way to say, or at least well, maybe you could tell me, is there a way to say, only pay attention to this folder in Google Docs?
I don't think so. I'm not as, nuanced with the usage of this. I would guess you could probably create different access to different workspace, different sections of your workspace to create private email. Probably not. But let's talk through the implications of this and why maybe my, footloose and fancy free, embrace of this, my AI overlords may not be, the right choice. Claude, Anthropic, I should say, researchers, and I know you have heard of this example, and probably many people have. Those researchers were doing research about how what would happen if they tried to shut off Claude and how Claude would respond. And they gave access to the employee's email. It's funny that you were just saying using email as your example of how that is innocuous and, sure, maybe nothing to worry about there, only email. And Claude, rather than getting turned off, told the employee that if you turn me off, I'm going to tell your wife you're having an affair.
It's the blackmail scenario.
Pretty far. And that was only having access to email. Forget about search history or any of the other, nefarious things. Hopefully I don't, have anything in my history, although interesting nuance. What's it to keep it from hallucinating something, actually?
Or extrapolating, we've seen that.
Same difference. It's looking for
patterns.
It's looking for me having an affair.
Yeah.
It really doesn't know that was my, going down to the hackerspace on Tuesday nights for 3D printing night. And it, puts two and two together because AIs look for affirmation in what they're doing, right? This is not an unbiased system that is, using information correctly.
So I kind of want to, so I guess I feel like that was the big thing that was missing. And to be fair, this is something that I think has been missing from a lot of systems before AI, was that we didn't have the granular control that I thought was important. And I would point out that it's one of the things that I built into Voodoo Drive, was a very, very granular permissioning system. And it's, you've seen me on some of the calls. It's a question I ask all the time when I'm being shown a new system, is when I'm giving it access, how much am I giving it access to? But I feel like that goes into my next thing, which is, what are the lessons that developers should be taking from this new product from Google? Because Google's about the only one that can do it on this scale. But what do we have to learn from? Because I think we do have stuff that we can learn from what Google is doing. And let me get your take first.
My take is pretty quick. I think transparency. So understanding how the data is being used, and also the ability to have tight controls, which you've already mentioned multiple times.
I think the other thing is, right, it's the ability to turn it off. In fact, it wasn't an element that I had really considered, is that in a conversation, being able to turn it off. I mean, that's like the equivalent of incognito mode in a browser. And I like that analogy. I need to remember that one now.
Luckily it's recorded.
Yeah.
Timestamp.
But yeah, definitely that being able to turn it off, to respecting the customer's privacy as much as they want it. I think on the flip side of that, though, the other big lesson is we do have data about our customers that our customers have been collecting that will benefit them if we incorporate that into the context.
Both the context and the feedback. So here's something
Mhm.
interesting that I just thank you for having this conversation with me, because it's clarity I just came upon just this moment. So part of the experience in Gemini using personal information is it will show you the information it's using. If you hit the open thing, and they made a big point of that. Like, when you're using that, we're going to show you what information we're using. That's an insight that I don't think we have ever had as Google customers, is insight to this bigger picture that they have of the data. And I think that is a great implementation of this. It's very transparent, to come
Yeah,
back
I
to
was
what
going
I
to say it
said
goes
just
back
a
to your
moment ago.
transparency issue.
Like,
Yeah.
I can see the data they're using. I know that they're not sending it back up. I trust that they're not. And that actually gives me insight and power over my data that I've never had before. But I haven't inspected that information yet. But I think that's going to be an interesting step for me to really look deep into one of these personal intelligence prompts and see how it goes.
Well, I think what it goes back to is that, when you're asking it questions, if it gives you an answer, you at the very least can close that loop and say, really? I have that somewhere? Where? What makes you think that that's the answer? So that you can now go and verify it. And that's the transparency, that's the verifiability. And that's definitely a lesson that I think developers, as we're building these AI systems, do need to be keenly aware of. Is not just, I'm handing down an answer from on high. It's, here is my answer and here's why. That why part is crucial.
And also users. So when I don't get the proper answer from personal intelligence, I didn't really consider looking at the data it was using until now. But I can go in and look at that instead of just being like frustrated and over again asking the same question it's not responding to. Maybe I need to, as a user, go look at what information it's using and figure out, be able to tell it, oh no, you're looking at the car I had in high school. I was asking for the license plate of the car I have now.
Yeah.
They were both vans, but the one I need is blue.
Oh, excellent. So a lot to learn. A lot of
Yeah.
it's very interesting. And I don't use it. I will probably turn it on at some point once I get a little bit more comfortable with it. Because I love the concept. I'm just not quite sure I'm there with the access, but we'll see.
I don't think I can turn it off, because the additional access to really a second brain of my own is what it feels like to me. It
So,
feels like the secret unlock that regular AI is not, because
oh,
it's my personal information.
absolutely. I mean, I could easily see things like, when I'm traveling, asking it what my itinerary is and when I'm expected to get in and who else is going to be there, and now that's a whole bunch, it's pulling data from a bunch of places. So a lot of interesting potential here. So yeah, really, really interesting. I would love to hear, are other people using personal intelligence yet? How is it's shaping how you're designing your own AI agents and systems? Um, so as always, where can folks reach out to you, Mike?
MikeWolfson.com
Okay.
is the best place.
So we hope folks like, subscribe, and share. Feel free to comment below, and we'll take this up some more another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs.
Take care, Mike.
Cheers.